On the morning of his visit, I baked lemon muffins, his favorite. I still believed, foolishly, that maybe if I showed kindness, I could keep my family close. I didn't know that by sunset, every word from my own son would taste like ashes. Leo arrived late, as always, his car too loud for our quiet street. He walked in like he owned the place, phone in hand, smile stretched thin, the kind of smile that means, I'm only here because I need something. Behind him, Sophia followed, perfume sharp and expensive, her eyes scanning my kitchen like it was a waiting room she couldn't wait to leave. "Hey, Mom," Leo said, leaning down to kiss my cheek without really touching it. "Smells good in here. Still baking, huh?" Still baking, still breathing, still existing. That's how his tone made it sound. I smiled anyway. "I made your favorite. Lemon muffins." He nodded but didn't take one. He just sat down, tapping his phone, and said, "So listen, I've got something important to talk to you about." That was the line. It always started like that, something important, which meant money. I sat across from him, folding my hands in my lap. Sophia crossed her legs, her bracelets clinking like little reminders that she had better things to do. Leo leaned back, pretending to sound casual. "You know how the economy's been rough. My new business idea could really stabilize things for all of us. But the bank's giving me a hard time with the paperwork. They say I need a co-signer or someone with more, established assets." He said assets the way a salesman says deal. Smooth, rehearsed. I felt the quiet settle heavy in my chest. "You mean me?" I said softly. He laughed, too quickly. "Well, yeah. You've got that account just sitting there, Mom. I'm not saying take it all out, just let me manage it. You don't really keep track of that stuff anyway." I froze. The words hit harder than I expected. You don't really keep track of that stuff anyway, as if my life savings, the money I earned from 27 years running a bookstore, was just some forgotten jar of coins on a shelf. Sophia sipped her latte and added, "Leo's just trying to help, Mrs. Vance. He's good with numbers." Mrs. Vance. Not Mom, not even Eleanor. Just Mrs. Vance. She used that tone, polite, distant, perfectly condescending, the kind that says you're old and you don't matter anymore. "I appreciate the concern," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "But I handle my finances just fine." Leo sighed dramatically like a teacher explaining something to a stubborn child. "Mom, you don't even know how money works anymore. You still write checks." There it was, the sting beneath the smile. I wanted to say something, to remind him that those checks paid for his first car, his college tuition, his wedding, and the down payment on his house. But I didn't. I just sat there, hands trembling under the table, my tea turning cold. "Leo," I said quietly, "I know about the bank." That got his attention. He looked up. "What do you mean?" I met his eyes. "They called me last week, said someone tried to change the primary holder on my account. They thought it was a mistake." For a moment, his face cracked, a flash of guilt, or maybe fear. Then he recovered, laughing again. "Oh, that. Mom. It was just a misunderstanding. I was helping with some paperwork. You know how confusing that stuff can be." Sophia placed a hand on his arm. "It's not a big deal. Honestly, you should be relieved he's taking care of things. You have enough to worry about at your age." At my age? The words echoed like a verdict. I looked at them, my son, my daughter-in-law, and felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not grief, just quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Leo stood and began pacing, gesturing with his hands. "Look, Mom, you can't take this personally. I'm just trying to make sure everything's in order before something happens." Before something happens. As if I were already fading, a liability waiting to expire. I felt my heart beating slow and steady, like it had made its own decision without me. "Leo," I said softly, "sit down." He blinked, confused by my tone. I wasn't begging anymore. I wasn't trying to please. He sat. You think I don't understand money, I continued. You think age means weakness. But I know exactly what I have, and I know what you've taken. He opened his mouth to protest, but I raised my hand. Don't. Not today. The room fell still. Even Sophia stopped pretending to scroll through her phone. I looked at the window, the pale afternoon light slipping across the counter. It reminded me of mornings long ago, when Leo was a boy sitting there with a bowl of cereal, asking questions about everything. Why is the sky blue, Mom? Why do people grow old? He used to look at me like I knew every answer. Now, he looked at me like a vault he couldn't open. I could almost hear my husband's voice in my memory, warm and steady. Don't let them take your kindness for blindness, Ellie. He used to say that when we were young, when life was still about building, not defending. I turned back to my son. Do you remember when you were 12 and I sold the bookstore? Leo frowned. Vaguely. I did it to pay for your private school. You cried because I gave away your favorite shelf of comic books. You said, Mom, one day I'll buy it all back for you. He looked uncomfortable. That was a long time ago. Yes, I said. It was. The silence after that was heavier than anything I could have shouted. Sophia cleared her throat. Maybe we should come back another time. No, I said. You should go now. Leo stared at me, disbelief flickering across his face. Mom, don't do this. You're overreacting. I was just trying to help. I smiled, but it wasn't the smile he knew. It was smaller, quieter. The kind that says I've already decided. I know, I whispered, and I'll take care of it. He didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. When they finally left, the door closed with a soft click. The house went still. I stood in the kitchen, the scent of lemon and sugar lingering like something already fading. For a moment, I felt the weight of years pressing on me. Every bill I paid, every birthday I remembered, every sacrifice I made. Then I exhaled. I walked to the sink, washed the untouched cups, and thought of the banker's voice on the phone. Mrs. Vance, did you authorize your son to change your account? That question had frightened me before. Now it steadied me. No, I had not, and I never would again. As the daylight thinned across the counter, I knew what tomorrow would bring. A visit to the bank, signatures withdrawn, access revoked. Tonight, I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't call anyone. I would just sit in my quiet kitchen, sip the tea that had gone cold, and let the truth settle like dust on the sunlight. They thought I was fading. They were wrong. Because somewhere between the bank's phone call and my son's careless words, something in me had woken up, something that had been silent for far too long. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual, the same walls, the same kitchen, but something inside me had shifted. For the first time in years, I didn't reach for the phone to check if Leo had called or needed something. The silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Still, resentment sat quietly in my chest, steady as my heartbeat. I spent the morning at the kitchen table sorting through old papers, receipts, account statements, the deed to the house. Every document felt like proof of a life, built 1 hour, one sacrifice at a time. Each page whispered a reminder of how many times I'd said yes when I should have said no. When I thought of Leo's words, "You don't even know how money works anymore," I felt a heat rise in my throat. It wasn't just disrespect, it was dismissal. To him, my life's work had turned into an inconvenience. To Sophia, I was just an obstacle. I had raised a man who could speak to his mother as if she were a stranger, and that realization hurt more than anything. I made myself get dressed, choosing my blue sweater and a simple scarf. It felt good to look put together. I had a purpose that morning. I was going to the bank. The drive there was quiet. The fall air was cool, the sky pale with the promise of rain. As I pulled into the parking lot, I remembered the first time I opened my account here, 40 years ago. My husband and I had stood at that same counter, proud and a little nervous, starting our life together. Back then, it felt like the world was wide open. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish. People were moving calmly, chatting softly, living their own little stories. I walked to the desk and asked for Mr. Davies, the branch manager. He'd called me last week about Leo's attempt to change my account. His voice had been careful, respectful, but I'd heard the hesitation beneath it. When he came out to greet me, his smile was kind. "Mrs. Vance, it's good to see you. How are you doing today?" "I've been better," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He led me into his office, and I sat down in the soft chair across from his desk. There was a photo of his family behind him, a wife and 2 teenage kids, all smiling. For a moment, I envied that picture. I used to think I had the same kind of family. He cleared his throat gently. "I understand you wanted to review your accounts?" "Yes," I said, "and I want to remove all authorizations. No one but me should have access." He nodded and began typing. "That's not a problem. Just to confirm, your son had submitted a request to become the primary account holder. We put that on hold because it didn't have your signature." The word son stung. It felt strange hearing Leo described that way in an official tone, as if he were just another name on a list. "I didn't authorize it," I said. "He had no right." "I understand," Mr. Davies said, his voice calm. "We'll take care of everything. Would you like to close the existing trust as well?" I hesitated. That trust had been built years ago, when I believed my family would always protect me. But now, it felt like leaving my house unlocked. "Yes," I said quietly. "Close it. I'll start a new one later, under my name only." He nodded again and handed me the forms. As I signed each page, a strange relief began to wash over me. Each pen stroke felt like a breath of fresh air, a small act of reclaiming my life. When it was done, Mr. Davies looked up. "You've been with us a long time, Mrs. Vance. I just want to say, you're doing the right thing. People forget that independence is worth more than money." His kindness almost broke me. I smiled, but my eyes burned. "Thank you," I said softly. On the drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. The sound of the tires on the road was enough. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what would happen if Leo called. I wasn't worried about disappointing him. I had nothing to explain, nothing to justify. When I got home, I made tea and sat by the window. The clouds had started to break apart, thin lines of light spilling through. I thought about the years I had spent living for other people, doing what they needed, waiting for gratitude that never came. Now, I understood something simple but powerful. I had been waiting for permission to live my own life. And no one could give that to me but myself. I took a deep breath and whispered into the quiet house, "It's my turn now." It wasn't anger anymore. It was freedom. Small and solid, growing stronger with every heartbeat. It rained the day Sophia came, the kind of soft, steady rain that makes everything feel smaller, quieter. I was standing by the kitchen window, watching the drops slide down the glass, when her silver car pulled into the driveway. My first thought wasn't surprise, it was disappointment. I had hoped, foolishly, that she and Leo might let me be for a while. She stepped out, umbrella in hand, perfectly dressed as always. Her heels clicked against the walkway, sharp and certain. When I opened the door, she smiled that polite, polished smile that never reached her eyes. "Hi, Mrs. Vance," she said. "I thought it might be good for us to talk. Woman to woman." Her tone was calm, but the words carried the weight of something else. Control. I could feel it before she even crossed the threshold. I invited her in, though part of me wanted to close the door right there. She placed her umbrella neatly by the mat and looked around the kitchen as if she were evaluating it, like a house she might one day own. "I made tea," I said. "Would you like some?" "Oh, sure," she replied, sitting down without waiting to be offered a chair. She placed her designer bag on the table right where my hands had been resting moments earlier. I poured the tea and sat across from her. The rain tapped gently against the window, the only sound between us for a few seconds. Then she sighed, as if this whole visit were a burden she was graciously enduring. "Leo's really been upset," she began. "He says you've been making some big financial changes. Closing accounts, moving things around, it's confusing for him. I didn't answer. I just watched the steam rise from my cup. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice in a tone meant to sound concerned. He's worried about you, Mrs. Vance. He thinks you're making decisions without understanding the impact. That word again, understanding. They both used it like a weapon, disguised as care. I understand more than you think, I said quietly. She smiled, but it was tight, controlled. Of course. But you know how complicated these things can get. Leo's been working so hard. He's under pressure trying to keep everything together for the family. For the family. I almost laughed. For his family, maybe. For their mortgage, their vacations, their new furniture. I'm sure he is, I said. Sophia nodded, her earrings glinting in the light. He just wants stability. You've always been generous, and it's made such a difference. He doesn't want that relationship to change. There it was, the reason she came. She wasn't here to talk about family or understanding. She was here to protect her comfort, to make sure the money kept flowing. I looked at her and saw something I hadn't before. It wasn't just greed. It was fear. Fear of losing control, of having to stand on her own. I'm sure you and Leo have made plenty of plans, I said, but they shouldn't depend on my bank account. Her smile faded, replaced by a flicker of irritation. That's not fair, she said. After everything Leo's done for you. I felt the words before I heard them leave my mouth. Everything he's done for me? She froze. I gave him his start, I said, my voice low but steady. I sold my business to pay his tuition. I helped him buy his first home. Every step of the way, I was there. Tell me, Sophia, what exactly has he done for me? She didn't answer right away. Her jaw tightened. The sound of rain filled the silence between us. Finally, she said, "He's been a good son. He visits you. He tries to make sure you're not alone." I smiled sadly. He visits when he needs something. That's not love. That's convenience. Her expression hardened. You're twisting everything. Leo just wants what's best for you. You should trust him. Trust. Another word they used like it meant safety, when it really meant surrender. I could have argued more. I could have told her about the nights I lay awake worrying about him, about how I kept helping even when I knew it wasn't right. But instead, I took a deep breath and said the only thing that mattered. I am not angry anymore, I said. I am simply done. For a moment, she didn't move. Then her expression changed. First disbelief, then something closer to panic. "You're making a mistake," she said sharply. "You can't just cut us out. Leo's your son." The words hit me like a memory, like another voice long ago. My father's voice the day I told him I was marrying the man he didn't approve of. "You'll regret this, Ellie. Family doesn't forget." I had believed him back then. I thought love meant obedience, but now I knew better. "I'm not cutting anyone out," I said softly. "I'm setting things right." Sophia stood, grabbing her bag, her calm mask beginning to crack. "You'll regret this," she said. "You're going to push him away for good." I rose too, slow and steady. If love depends on money, it's already gone. She stared at me for a moment, eyes cold and calculating. Then she turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the tile. The sound faded down the hall, then out the door. A moment later, the car engine started, and she was gone. The house was quiet again, except for the rain. I stood there for a long time, watching it fall. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from something stronger. Release. I walked to the desk by the window, opened the drawer, and took out the folder I had prepared at the bank. Inside were all the documents I needed. New accounts, updated signatures, fresh beginnings. Everything was finally under my name alone. I ran my fingers over the papers, feeling the smooth edges. They weren't just documents. They were proof that I had chosen myself. Outside, the rain slowed, turning to a soft drizzle. The light through the clouds looked almost silver. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt free. I made another cup of tea, sat by the window, and let the warmth settle in my chest. The storm had passed, but its echo still hummed in the air. Maybe Leo and Sophia would be furious. Maybe they'd call, or maybe they wouldn't. But it didn't matter anymore, because I finally understood that peace isn't given, it's claimed, and I had just claimed mine. The first call came early in the morning. I was still in my robe, pouring coffee, when the phone rang. Leo's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, I just watched it ring, that familiar name pulling at me like an old habit. Then I let it go to voicemail. I already knew what it would be about. By the time the second call came, the sun was up and the sky was a clean, cold blue. I stepped out onto the porch with my mug, breathing in the quiet. I could almost pretend things were normal, that we were still a family that cared for one another. But then my phone buzzed again, this time with a text. "Leo, I can't believe you did this to us. Dad would be ashamed." That one hit deep. He knew exactly where to strike. My late husband's memory had always been sacred to me, and Leo was using it like a weapon. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the injustice of it. I wanted to write back to remind him that his father worked his whole life to teach him responsibility, not entitlement. But I didn't. I put the phone face down on the table. The silence that followed was worse than any argument. I could feel the distance between us widening, like a rope finally snapping after years of tension. But I also felt something else, relief. For once, I wasn't the one apologizing. By the third day, the calls came from Sophia. Her messages were longer, sharper, and colder. "You've really hurt Leo," she wrote. "Do you understand what this is doing to our family? We counted on that money. You've destroyed everything." I read the message 3 times, each word pressing deeper. We counted on that money. Not we cared about you. Not we're worried about you. Just money. That was the truth I had been refusing to face. They didn't miss me. They missed the convenience of me. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Leo had once spread out his school books, where I'd stayed up late balancing bills and reading stories to him when he was small. I thought about every holiday meal, every birthday, every moment I had held my tongue to keep the peace. All those years of saying yes, hoping love would come back my way. It didn't. Now I could finally see how much I'd given up trying to make everyone else comfortable. I'd become the invisible one, the one who always fixed, always forgave. And when I finally stopped, they called it betrayal. Later that week, Sophia showed up at the house without warning. I saw her car through the curtain before she even knocked. She looked polished as always, perfect makeup, perfect clothes, the kind of composure people wear when they plan to win an argument. "Eleanor," she said when I opened the door, "we need to talk." I let her in, though I already knew how it would go. She stood in my living room, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Leo hasn't been sleeping. He's devastated. You've turned your back on your own family." I said nothing. She went on, voice rising. "He's done everything for you, everything. And this is how you thank him? By embarrassing him at the bank?" That word, embarrassing, made my stomach tighten. That's what it came down to. Not the lies, not the manipulation, but his pride. I wanted to shout, to remind her of all the times I'd quietly paid their bills, helped with Clara's tuition, or pretended not to notice their carelessness. But I stayed still. "I'm not explaining myself anymore," I said finally. "You can believe whatever helps you sleep at night." Sophia stared at me, taken aback. "You think you're the victim here, don't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't owe her one. When she realized she wasn't going to win, she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the house, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, their anger didn't reach me. It washed over me and disappeared. That night, the quiet felt different. It wasn't loneliness, it was space. Space to breathe, to think, to exist without walking on eggshells. I sat by the window, looking out at the yard. The light from the street lamp cast soft shadows over the garden, the one I used to tend with Leo when he was a boy. I remembered his small hands planting those first flowers, his laughter, his pride when they bloomed. Somewhere along the way, that boy had vanished into a man I barely recognized. It hurt, but it also set me free. They could accuse me, twist the story, say I'd destroyed the comfort of the family, but the truth was I had only stopped being their safety net. And if that made me the villain in their version, I could live with that. I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because I no longer needed it to be. A week passed before Leo called again. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear his voice one last time, maybe to see if there was even a trace of the son I used to know. When I picked up, there was no greeting, no warmth, only anger. "Mom," he said sharply, "what did you do? The bank called. You took everything out. Do you have any idea what you've done to us?" His tone was cold, clipped, like I was a stranger who'd broken some rule. I could hear Sophia in the background, her voice faint but furious. I imagined her pacing, waving her hands, feeding his outrage. "I didn't take anything from you," I said calmly. "I just took back what was mine." He scoffed. "You think this is fair? After everything I've done for you, you're throwing away years of trust." That word again, trust. It used to mean love. Now it sounded like ownership. "I trusted you," I said, my voice steady, "and you used that trust to try to take control of my life." He didn't respond right away. I could hear his breathing on the line, quick and uneven. Finally, he said, "You're being manipulated, Mom. Someone's filling your head with nonsense. You're not thinking straight." I almost laughed, but it came out as a sigh. "Leo," I said, "the only person who's been filling my head with nonsense is you." There was silence. Then he muttered, "Dad would be disappointed." That was the moment my heart broke, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them, cold, rehearsed. He wasn't reaching for love. He was using it as a tool. "I think your father would be proud," I said quietly, because I finally remembered what he taught me, that respect isn't given out of guilt, it's earned through honesty. He said something under his breath, then hung up. I stood there, holding the phone in my hand, staring at it like it might still hold the boy he once was. But the line was dead, and so was the illusion I'd held onto for far too long. Later that afternoon, I went to the bank to finalize Clara's trust. Mr. Davies greeted me with his usual kindness. He had the papers ready, neat and organized. "Everything's set, Mrs. Vance," he said. "This will secure your granddaughter's education fund exactly as you requested." I nodded, signing each page slowly, carefully, feeling the weight of each decision. When I finished, he smiled. "You did something good today. You made sure your hard work will go to someone who truly deserves it." His words touched me more deeply than he probably realized. I had spent years being told that my value was tied to what I gave away. Now, for the first time, I was giving with purpose, not obligation. I reached into my bag and handed him a small box. "Just a thank you," I said. Inside were a few of my homemade cookies. He laughed softly, surprised. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I replied, and I meant it. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp and bright. The rain from last week had washed everything clean. The trees were glowing gold and orange in the afternoon sun. I stood there for a moment, breathing it all in. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Leo. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it would say. Guilt, accusation, blame. That cycle was over now. Instead, I called Clara. Her voice was soft when she answered. "Grandma, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said. "I just wanted to tell you something important. You don't need to worry about college anymore." There was silence on the line, then a small, trembling, "What do you mean?" I smiled. "I set something up for you, a trust. It's all taken care of." Her voice cracked. "Grandma." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I interrupted gently. Because you see me. You always have. When we hung up, I sat on a bench outside the bank, watching people hurry past. Everyone seemed to be chasing something: time, money, approval. I had spent a lifetime chasing those same things for others. But now I finally understood. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. As the sun dipped lower, I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. I wasn't angry anymore, just free. A message from Sophia flashed on my phone, another attempt to make me feel guilty. I smiled and deleted it. No reply, no defense, just silence. For the first time in my life, silence felt like power. I started walking home, the sound of leaves crunching beneath my shoes. I didn't look back. The world felt wide again, full of new air and possibility. I realized age is not about weakness, it's about dignity, and I wasn't afraid to live with mine anymore.